There is a kind of exhaustion that does not come from working too hard. It comes from living wrong. You know the feeling. You wake up and before your eyes have even fully opened, something in your chest is already tight, already bracing, already preparing for a day that feels more like a performance than a life. You scroll, you rush, you respond, you produce, you consume, you collapse, and then you do it all over again. And somewhere, buried under the noise and the speed and the endless wanting, there is a quieter version of you, asking a question you barely let yourself hear. Is this really it? Is this what I worked so hard for? Is this what life was supposed to feel like? Charles Wagner asked that question too. He asked it more than a century ago, and the fact that his answer still lands so hard today, still feels so necessary, still feels so urgently true, tells you something important. Not about how much the world has changed, about how little the human soul has. Wagner was a French Protestant pastor, a writer, a thinker, and a man who spent his life watching people suffer in ways they could not name. Not the suffering of poverty alone, or illness alone, but the suffering of people who had everything and still felt empty. The suffering of people who were busy every hour of every day and still felt like their life was slipping past them. He watched the modern world being born, with its factories and its telegraph lines and its frantic pace, and he felt something that we would recognize instantly if we are honest with ourselves. He felt worried, not about progress, about what progress was costing people at the level of the soul. So he wrote a book. He called it The Simple Life, and when it was published in 1901, it became a sensation. It was translated into multiple languages. President Theodore Roosevelt read it and loved it so much that he personally invited Wagner to the White House. For a moment in time, the whole world seemed to be leaning in, hungry for what this quiet Frenchman had to say. And then the world moved on, as the world always does. But the question Wagner asked did not go away. It just went underground. It became the kind of thing people feel but do not know how to say. The kind of longing that hides under busyness, under ambition, under the noise of everything modern life demands from you. This summary is going to walk you through what Wagner actually said, not in fragments, not in bullet points, but the way he meant it as a whole living idea, the kind that gets inside you and rearranges something quietly. Because what he understood about simplicity is not what most people think when they hear that word. It is not about deprivation. It is not about rejecting technology or going to live in a forest with no shoes. It is something much more radical and much more beautiful than that. It is about learning to be real again in a world that keeps pushing you toward performance. It is about recovering the thread of your own life before you lose it entirely. Let us start where Wagner starts, with the diagnosis. He looks at the people around him, the educated, the ambitious, the successful, and he sees something that troubles him deeply. He sees people who have multiplied their needs to the point where they are enslaved by them. Every new comfort creates a new dependency. Every new luxury, once tasted, becomes a necessity. And the more you need, the harder you have to work to maintain it all, and the less free you are. The life that was supposed to get easier with every advancement gets, instead, more complicated, more pressured, more exhausting. Think about a man Wagner might observe, though he would not put it this way, because he is writing in 1901 and not imagining your inbox. But imagine a man who starts his career wanting simply to do good work and live decently. He works hard, earns more, moves to a bigger house, because of course you move to a bigger house when you can afford to. The bigger house needs more furniture. The furniture needs to be cleaned and maintained. The neighborhood requires a certain kind of car. The car requires insurance and payments and service. The children go to a school that requires certain clothes and certain vacations and a certain kind of birthday party. And the man finds himself working not for anything he truly wants, but simply to keep up, to maintain the machine he has built around himself, to service the life he accidentally constructed while he was busy trying to have a good one. Wagner would recognize this immediately. He calls it the tyranny of multiplied needs, and he says with a gentleness that somehow makes it hit harder that we have confused the means of living with living itself. There is a woman, too, in this picture, though again Wagner is writing in a different era, but the soul he is speaking to is timeless. She has a full calendar, a full schedule, a full life by every external measure. She gives, she volunteers, she parents, she works, she attends, she performs. She is, by all accounts, doing everything right. And yet somewhere in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday, while she is driving somewhere she does not particularly want to go, to do something that does not particularly matter to her, she feels it. That hollow ache, that sense that she is living alongside her life rather than inside it. Wagner would say she is suffering from the same disease, the disease of complexity, the disease of having allowed the surface of life to become so thick and so demanding that the actual substance of life, The relationships, the stillness, the wonder, the love, the simple dignity of being a human being on this earth has been buried beneath it. This is his starting point, and it is not a comfortable one, but it is honest. And honesty, Wagner believed, is one of the foundations of the simple life. Before you can simplify, you have to be willing to see clearly. You have to be willing to admit that something is wrong, even when the world keeps insisting everything is fine. Now here is where Wagner does something unexpected. He does not immediately tell you to sell your house and move to the countryside. He does not give you a list of things to stop buying. He goes somewhere much deeper first. He goes to the question of character. Wagner believes that simplicity is not primarily a lifestyle choice. It is a quality of the soul. It is something that either lives in you or it does not. And the way to find it is not to rearrange your external circumstances, but to do something much harder. To ask what you actually value, to get honest, genuinely honest about what you are living for. He puts it beautifully. He says that a simple person is not one who has little, but one who knows what they truly need and is satisfied with it. That satisfaction, that genuine contentment with enough, is not laziness, it is not weakness. It is one of the hardest things a human being can cultivate in a world that is constantly whispering that you need more, that you are not enough yet, that satisfaction is always one purchase, one achievement, one upgrade away. And here is something worth sitting with for a moment, because it connects to something so many people feel but never quite put into words. The reason the modern world is so exhausting is not just that it moves fast. It is that it constantly creates new desires faster than any of those desires can be satisfied. The whole engine of consumer culture runs on your dissatisfaction. It needs you to be restless. It needs you to feel that you are missing something. Because the moment you feel genuinely content with what you have, you stop being a very useful consumer. You become, in the best possible sense, a threat to the machine. Wagner understood this a century before the algorithm existed. He understood that the forces shaping society had a vested interest in your discontent. And he called people to something that felt, then, as now, quietly revolutionary. He called them to want less, not from asceticism, not from self-punishment, but from the freedom that comes when you realize you already have enough to live beautifully. There is a story, and it is not from Wagner's book, but it belongs here, about a fisherman who lives in a small coastal village. A businessman comes to visit and finds the fisherman sitting on the dock in the mid-morning sun, relaxed, watching the water. The businessman asks him why he is not out fishing. The fisherman says he has already caught enough for the day. The businessman tells him that if he fished more, he could sell more fish, earn more money, buy a bigger boat, hire a crew, expand his operation, eventually build a whole company, and then, after many years of hard work, he could retire. And then, the businessman says, he could sit by the water in the mid-morning sun and relax. The fisherman looks at him, and then looks back at the water. That story sounds simple, almost too simple. But it contains something that Wagner spends an entire book trying to say, that we have been talked into a very complicated route to places we could reach directly. That the life most people are working so hard to eventually live is often available to them, in some essential form, right now, if they would only stop moving long enough to see it. But Wagner is not naive. He does not pretend the world is without obligations, without need, without the reality of work and responsibility. He is not telling you to stop caring for your family or to abandon your duties. He is making a finer point. He is saying that within whatever life you are living, there is a choice about how you live it. There is a way of being present or absent. There is a way of doing things that comes from your center, or one that comes from fear, or status, or the need for approval. And the quality of your life, the real quality, the inner texture of it, depends enormously on which of those modes you are operating from. He talks about sincerity as one of the great necessities of the simple life. And by sincerity, he means something quite specific. He means the alignment between what you feel and what you do, between what you believe and how you live. He means the end of performance, of pretending, of wearing faces that do not belong to you because you think they will help you get something you want. He means coming back to yourself, whatever that costs. This is harder than it sounds, because we live in a world that rewards performance magnificently. The polished version, the curated version, the impressive version, gets the job, gets the likes, gets the promotion, gets the table at the good restaurant. The real version, the uncertain version, the quietly human version, does not always photograph well. And so we learn over time to lead with the performance and to keep the real self in reserve, bringing it out only in private, only when it is safe, only when we are sure it will not be judged. Wagner says this is one of the most quietly devastating things a person can do to themselves. Not because honesty is always rewarded, it often is not, but because the cost of inauthenticity is paid in the currency of your own aliveness. Every time you perform instead of genuinely engage, something in you dims a little. Every time you say what you think people want to hear instead of what you actually think, you put a little more distance between yourself and the experience of really being alive. He is not asking for social recklessness. He is not saying go tell your boss exactly what you think of him or announce your every doubt at a dinner party. He is talking about something interior, a decision made quietly to stop lying to yourself, to sit with what you actually feel, what you actually believe, what you actually want, and to let that be the ground you build on, even if the building takes time, even if it requires some difficult conversations, even if it means accepting that some of the things you have been working toward are not really things you want at all. That last part is where it gets uncomfortable, because sometimes the honest inventory reveals that you have been living someone else's version of a good life, that the career you are pursuing, the neighborhood you are trying to live in, the kind of person you have been performing as, these things were shaped by expectations that were never really yours. Your parents' hopes, your culture's definitions of success, the comparison game you have been playing since you first became aware that other people were watching. Around the 10-minute mark, let us pause on this, because it is central to everything Wagner is trying to say. He writes about what he calls the inner life. And he means by this something very specific, not religion exactly, though for him faith was part of it, but something broader, the part of you that exists independent of what anyone else thinks of you, the part that has its own knowledge, its own sense of what matters, its own quiet authority, the part that you can hear when everything goes quiet enough, asking the questions that really matter. Am I living truly? Am I loving well? Is this how I want to spend the one life I have been given? Wagner is deeply worried, as a pastor and as a human being, that the noise of modern life, even the noise of 1901, let alone today, is making it almost impossible for people to hear that inner voice. And when you cannot hear it, you become easy to lead, easy to sell to, easy to distract, easy to fill with other people's values and other people's urgencies and other people's definitions of what a life well lived looks like. Recovering the capacity for stillness, for genuine interior quiet, is not, in Wagner's view, a luxury or an indulgence. It is a survival skill. It is the thing that keeps you anchored to yourself when everything around you is pulling you in 10 directions at once. He is not prescriptive about how you find this stillness. He does not tell you to meditate for exactly 20 minutes every morning or to keep a particular kind of journal. He simply insists that you must find a way. You must make a practice of returning to yourself. Because if you do not, you will wake up one day and discover that you have been so thoroughly shaped by external forces that there is almost nothing left of the person you started as. And that discovery, when it comes, is one of the loneliest experiences a human being can have. Let us talk about nature for a moment, because Wagner returns to it again and again, and because his feeling about it is not the sentimental kind that hangs pictures of mountains on office walls. It is something more substantive. He believes that contact with the natural world does something to a human being that nothing else can quite replicate. That it restores proportion. That it reminds you, in a way that bypasses language entirely, of what is actually large and what is actually small. That the things you have been worrying about, the email you have not answered, the opinion someone formed of you, the meeting you are dreading, tend to shrink to their actual size when you are standing in a forest or watching the sun go down over water. There is something he writes about the way a child approaches the world, before complexity sets in, with that wide, available attention, with that willingness to be completely absorbed in a beetle or a puddle or the way light falls through leaves. He says that one of the saddest losses of adult life is the loss of that kind of attention, that ability to be fully here, fully interested, fully alive to what is immediately in front of you, without the part of your mind that is always elsewhere, already in the next moment, already planning, already worrying, already somewhere you have not arrived yet. He is talking about what we would now call presence, but he is talking about it in a way that goes beyond technique. He is saying that presence is not a skill you layer on top of a complicated life. It is something that emerges naturally when the life is simple enough to actually inhabit, when you are not managing so much that your attention is permanently fractured, when you have left enough space in the day that a bird, or a conversation, or a piece of bread eaten slowly can actually reach you. And here is something that connects this to our daily lives in a very concrete way. Wagner notices that one of the effects of complexity is that it degrades the quality of attention we give to the people we love. He is remarkably perceptive about this. He notices how the man who comes home after a day of frantic activity is not really home. His body is there, but his mind is still in the office, still in the meeting, still in the problem. His children are talking to him, and he is nodding in the right places, but he is not really listening. His wife is telling him something that matters to her, and he is half with her and half somewhere else. And this distance, this chronic half-presence, does something to relationships over time. It hollows them out. It creates a kind of loneliness within intimacy that is in some ways harder to bear than ordinary loneliness, because at least with ordinary loneliness, you know you are alone. And he grieves it, because he believes that the relationship between people, the actual meeting of two human beings in a moment of genuine attention and care, is one of the most precious things in existence. He is at heart a man who loves people, not abstractly, concretely. He loves the specific texture of human connection, the way a real conversation opens something up, the way genuine kindness between two people creates something that neither of them could create alone. And he sees that complexity is the enemy of this, that the more overscheduled, overstimulated, and overextended you are, the less of yourself you have to give to the people who matter most to you. There is a kind of poverty, he says, that has nothing to do with money. It is the poverty of the person who is so wealthy in activities and obligations and commitments that they have nothing left to give. No real attention, no unhurried time, no spontaneous warmth. They have carved their days into such small pieces, each piece owned by some obligation or other, that there is no moment left that belongs simply to being human together with another person. Think of your own life for a moment. Think of the last time you had a conversation with someone you love where you were fully there, where you were not also monitoring your phone, or thinking about the next thing you needed to do, or half composing a response before the other person had finished speaking. Those conversations are becoming rarer, are they not? And what goes with them is something you cannot quite name but you feel the absence of, a kind of nourishment. The particular satisfaction of having been genuinely seen and of genuinely seeing someone else. Wagner would say that this is not a small loss. He would say it is one of the central impoverishments of the complicated life, and that recovering it requires not more scheduling, not another app, not a better system for managing your time, but something simpler and harder. The willingness to do less, so that what you do, you can do with your whole self. He writes beautifully about what he calls the duties of daily life. And here is where he surprises you, because he is not dismissive of ordinary work and ordinary obligation. He does not romanticize idleness or pretend that adult life can or should be freed from responsibility. What he argues instead is that the simple life is one in which your duties and your true values are in alignment. One in which you are not doing 10 things and none of them matter to you, but doing fewer things and caring about them genuinely. He tells the story, in essence, of the craftsman, the person who makes a thing well, not because making it well is faster or more profitable, but because they have a relationship with the work. They take pride in it, not the performance of pride, but the real thing, the genuine satisfaction of having done something right. They put themselves into it, and when the thing is finished, it carries something of them, some quality of care and attention and honest effort that you can feel when you encounter it. This kind of relationship to work is, Wagner believes, one of the great sources of human happiness, and it does not require that your work be grand or important by anyone else's measure. It can be any work, however humble, that you do with full attention and genuine engagement. The cook who really cooks, the teacher who really teaches, the parent who is really present, the clerk who treats every person at the counter with the same unhurried courtesy. There is a dignity in that kind of work, whatever it is, that no amount of status or salary can manufacture. But this relationship to work is almost impossible to sustain when you are spread so thin that nothing gets your full self. When you are always doing 3 things at once, always managing multiple streams, always optimizing, always checking whether this minute could be used more efficiently. The irony is that in the race to do everything more efficiently, we often end up doing everything less well and experiencing everything less fully, and arriving at the end of the day having technically accomplished a great deal and actually having lived very little. Let us talk about money for a moment, because Wagner does, and because he is careful and honest about it in a way that is worth paying attention to. He is not against money. He is not against comfort. He does not think that poverty is noble or that wealth is shameful. What he is against is the confusion of financial accumulation with the good life. The assumption, built so deeply into modern culture that most people never even notice it, that more money always equals more happiness, that the person with the biggest house and the most impressive portfolio is the winner of the game. He points out, gently but firmly, that this is demonstrably false, that beyond a certain point the pursuit of more wealth stops adding to happiness and begins subtracting from it, because the wealth that goes beyond genuine security and genuine comfort requires, to accumulate and maintain it, more and more of the only truly finite resource you have: your time, your attention, your presence, your life. He would recognize, instantly, the modern phenomenon of the person who has achieved financial success beyond anything their parents could have imagined, and who feels underneath it all a persistent sense of meaninglessness. who has won the game by every metric the game provides and still finds themselves lying awake at 3 in the morning, wondering what the point of it all is. This is not a personal failure. It is what happens when you optimize for the wrong thing for long enough, when you have chased a metric that was never actually connected to what you needed. Wagner's prescription for this is not financial, it is philosophical. He asks you to get clear, genuinely clear, about what enough looks like, not as an abstract number, but as a felt sense. What would a life feel like? What would your days feel like if you were living with enough? Not abundance by someone else's definition, not deprivation, but genuinely, honestly, enough. And he suggests that for most people, that number is lower than they think, and that reaching it does not require more striving but less. Not more complexity but more clarity about what actually matters. Please like and subscribe to Audiobook Library if you are finding value in this. It really does help the channel grow, and it helps us bring more content like this to more people who might need it. Let us talk now about something Wagner calls the life of the spirit, because this is where he goes deepest, and it is also where, if you are not careful, you might think he is talking about something that does not apply to you. But stay with it, because what he means is broader and more human than it might initially sound. Wagner believes that every human being has at their center something that hungers for meaning. Not pleasure, exactly, not comfort, not success, but meaning. The sense that this life, your life, this particular arrangement of days and relationships and choices amounts to something, points towards something, is oriented around something that makes it worth having lived. He thinks this hunger is one of the defining features of being human, and he is distressed by how thoroughly the complicated life suppresses it, not by answering it, but by keeping you too busy to feel it. When you are constantly stimulated, constantly consuming, constantly managing, the deeper question does not go away. It just gets drowned out. And you become, over time, a person who is busy in ways that feel meaningless, but who is never still long enough to figure out what meaning would actually look like for you. This suppression is, in Wagner's view, one of the great costs of the modern way of life, and it is a cost that compounds, because the longer you go without genuinely engaging with the question of what matters to you, the further you drift from it. The more foreign and uncomfortable the question becomes, until you reach a point where people who ask it seem naive or impractical or vaguely suspect, where the whole culture has agreed by silent consensus to stop asking the most important question. Wagner refuses to stop asking it. He asks it on every page. What are you living for? What do you love? What would you regret? What would you do with your one life if you were genuinely free to choose? And he believes, warmly and with real conviction, that when people actually slow down enough to answer those questions honestly, the answers are almost never as complicated as the lives they are living. Most people, given genuine freedom and genuine quiet, want things that are surprisingly simple. They want good relationships. They want meaningful work. They want to be present for the people they love. They want to feel, at the end of the day, that what they did mattered in some real way, even if that way is quiet and will never be celebrated. They want to spend some time in beauty. They want to feel sometimes the particular joy of being alive. These are not expensive wants. They are not the wants of people who need more money, more status, more complexity. They are the wants of people who need less noise, less pressure, less performance, less distance from themselves. Wagner has a passage that has stayed with me since I first encountered it, and I will paraphrase it here rather than quote it directly, because the idea matters more than the precise words. He describes two people standing before the same sunset. One of them is there fully. They see the colors, they feel the coolness of the evening air, they are moved, in that quiet, wordless way, by the beauty of it. They will carry something of this moment with them. The other person is also standing in front of the sunset, but they are elsewhere. They are thinking about something that needs to be done, or something that was said, or something coming tomorrow. The sunset happens in front of them but not for them, and they walk away from it exactly as they came, a little more depleted, though they could not tell you why. He uses this image to talk about what he sees as the central spiritual impoverishment of busy modern life. Not the absence of beautiful things, the world is full of beautiful things, but the absence of the capacity to receive them, the inability to be available to what is actually happening, what is actually here, what is actually being offered. The sunset does not care whether you are present for it, but you will care. Some part of you will carry the loss of it, even if you cannot name what you lost. And this is true of everything, not just sunsets. Every conversation that happened in front of you while you were elsewhere, every meal you ate without tasting, every moment with a child that you were present for in body but absent for in every way that matters. These are not tragedies in the dramatic sense. They are the slow, quiet hemorrhage of a life that is being lived too fast to actually be experienced. Wagner's answer to all of this is not a program. He is not a management consultant. He is a pastor and a writer and a man who loves people, and his answer is more like an invitation than a prescription. He invites you to begin, not to overhaul everything at once, not to sell the house and move to the country, but to begin somewhere small, to find one place in your life where you can choose simplicity over complexity, where you can choose depth over breadth, where you can choose presence over production. Maybe it is the meal you eat without your phone. Maybe it is the walk you take without a destination. Maybe it is the conversation where you resist the urge to offer advice and instead simply listen. Maybe it is the hour of a Sunday morning where you do not schedule anything and you sit with whatever comes and you let the silence be what it is. These are not grand gestures. They will not make it into your biography, but they are, Wagner insists, the exact texture of a life well lived. They are the substance of the simple life. Not dramatic renunciations, but ordinary moments claimed back from the noise and returned to their rightful purpose, which is being genuinely, humanly, beautifully lived. He is also very good on the question of comparison, which is one of the central diseases of social life in every era, though our era has given it a particularly powerful engine. He notices how the habit of measuring your life against other people's lives creates a specific kind of unhappiness, not the sharp unhappiness of loss or failure, but a chronic low-grade dissatisfaction, a sense that you are always slightly behind, always slightly less than, always living in a slightly smaller and less impressive life than someone else. Wagner says this is one of the most reliable ways to make yourself miserable, because the comparison game has no floor. There is always someone who has more, looks better, travels more, succeeds more impressively, seems to have figured out something you have not. And every time you measure yourself against them and find yourself wanting, you subtract a little more from the store of your own contentment. You make yourself a little less available to what is actually good in your own life, a little less capable of gratitude, a little less at home in your own existence. His prescription for this is characteristic. He does not tell you to try harder to be grateful. He tells you to stop looking sideways, to return your attention to the life you are actually living, to the specific, particular, unrepeatable texture of your own days and relationships and work, to find what is genuinely good there, not by comparison but absolutely. Not good compared to someone else's bad, but simply good, worthy, valuable because it is yours and you are alive in it. There is a discipline in this that is harder than any diet or exercise routine because it runs against one of the deepest habits of social life. But Wagner believes it is one of the most liberating things you can do, to release the comparison, to stop auditing your life against other people's highlight reels, to come home to your own experience and be there with it, with its actual texture, its actual beauty, its actual difficulties, without always holding it up to some imagined better version. He writes about gratitude in a way that feels fresh even now, because he separates it from the slightly forced quality it can have when it is treated as a performance or a practice. He is not interested in gratitude as a habit you bolt onto a life that remains fundamentally oriented toward wanting more. He is interested in the kind of gratitude that grows organically from a life that has been simplified enough that you can actually see what is there. When you stop running, when you stop accumulating, when you stop performing, when the noise quiets, what you often discover is that what you already have is, in fact, more than enough. That your life, as it actually is, contains more beauty and more warmth and more genuine richness than the version of it you were carrying around in your anxious imagination. This is not toxic positivity. This is not the pretense that everything is fine when it is not. Wagner has no patience for that kind of denial. He is perfectly clear-eyed about difficulty and suffering. But he makes a distinction between the suffering that is real and the suffering that is manufactured by the habit of never being satisfied. And he says that a great deal of what passes for unhappiness in comfortable modern life is the second kind. The suffering of wanting what you do not have, rather than the suffering of genuine loss or genuine pain. Let us talk about relationships more specifically now, because Wagner gives them a great deal of attention, and rightly so, because they are, in his view, the place where the simple life either lives or dies. You can simplify your possessions, your schedule, your ambitions, your relationship to status, and still be living a complicated, depleting life if your relationships are characterized by performance, by competition, by the management of impressions, by the careful strategic navigation that passes for connection in a world where everyone is worried about how they appear. Real friendship, in Wagner's understanding, is one of the most profound gifts available to a human being. Not the friendly acquaintance that passes for friendship in social contexts, not the networking relationship dressed up in the language of connection, but the actual thing, the relationship where you do not have to perform, where you can bring the uncertain, complicated, sometimes confused version of yourself and know that you will be received without judgment, where there is genuine care, genuine interest, genuine willingness to be present for whatever is actually happening for the other person, rather than the curated version they offer to the world. He believes that most people have fewer of these relationships than they need, and that one of the reasons is that maintaining them requires the very thing that complexity makes scarce. Time. Unhurried, unstructured time. The kind of time where you can sit with someone for long enough that the surface conversation falls away and you get to something real. That kind of time does not happen in a 30-minute slot between two other commitments. It does not happen across a screen. It happens when two people are together without a particular agenda, without the pressure of the clock, available to wherever the conversation goes. Wagner mourns the loss of this kind of time in modern life, and he is right that something is lost. Because the depth of a friendship is not proportional to the number of times you see someone. It is proportional to the quality of the time you spend together, and quality requires the one ingredient that is hardest to manufacture: genuine unhurriedness, the willingness to not be somewhere else. He also writes about what he calls the education of the heart, which is one of the most beautiful ideas in the whole book. He believes that one of the central projects of a human life should be the cultivation of love. Not romantic love specifically, though that too, but love in the broadest sense. The capacity to be genuinely interested in other people, to care about their experience, to find them in their particularity wonderful and worthy of attention, to be moved by their suffering and delighted by their flourishing. He worries that the complicated life narrows this capacity, that when you are always distracted, always managing, always performing, you become gradually less available to other people's reality, less able to be surprised or moved by them, less capable of the kind of generous attention that makes another person feel seen and valued. And this narrowing, he says, is one of the quietest and most serious forms of impoverishment. Because a life without the genuine love of other people, however successful or comfortable it might be by other measures, is a life that is missing its center. The cure for this is, as always with Wagner, not a technique, but a reorientation. You do not cultivate the education of the heart by following a program. You cultivate it by slowing down enough that other people can actually reach you, by caring less about the impression you are making and more about the person in front of you. By practicing, in small ordinary moments, the radical act of genuine interest, the question asked and really listened to, the difficulty acknowledged without immediately being solved, the presence offered without condition. Wagner writes movingly about the beauty of ordinary human life when it is seen clearly. He has an eye for the quiet heroism of people who do their work with care, who love their families with steadiness, who face their difficulties with dignity, who give what they have without drama or self-congratulation. He finds these people everywhere, in villages and in cities, in humble work and in important work, and he is moved by them, because he sees in them what the simple life actually looks like when it is lived. Not the romantic version, not the Instagram pastoral version, but the real thing. People who are genuinely present in their own lives, giving genuinely of themselves, finding genuine satisfaction in what is genuinely available to them. He is not describing extraordinary people. He is describing the extraordinary possibility that is available to ordinary people who have made certain choices. The choice to be real, the choice to be present, the choice to value what is actually valuable rather than what is merely impressive, the choice to live from their center rather than from their performance. And he is, throughout all of this, radically hopeful. This is perhaps the most surprising thing about the simple life. It is not a lament, it is an invitation. It is written by a man who genuinely believes that the good life is available, not to the specially fortunate, not to the wealthy or the clever or the powerful, but to anyone who is willing to make certain choices, to stop, to look clearly, to release what is not actually serving the life they want to live, and to give their full attention to what is. He believes in people. He believes in the human capacity for goodness and for growth. He believes that the soul, however buried under complexity and noise and performance, retains its essential nature. That it knows, when given the chance to speak, what it actually needs. That it moves, when allowed to move freely, toward what is genuinely nourishing. Toward beauty, toward love, toward meaningful work, toward honest relationship, toward the particular joy of being alive in a world that is, when you stop running long enough to look at it, breathtakingly beautiful. There is a passage in the book, one of the most frequently quoted in the century since it was written, where Wagner describes what he sees as the essential quality of the simple life. And though I am putting it in my own words, the spirit of it is his. He says that the simple life is not the life without activity, or without ambition, or without engagement with the world. It is the life in which every activity, every ambition, every engagement flows from a clear center, in which you know why you are doing what you are doing, in which there is a coherent self beneath all the doing, one that is not lost in the doing, one that remains in contact with its own values and its own loves and its own sense of what matters. The simple life is not the quiet life, it is the integrated life, the life in which what you do and who you are not in constant tension. This is ultimately what Wagner is offering. Not a lifestyle, not a formula, not a set of rules, but a way of being in the world, a way of inhabiting your own existence with fullness and honesty and care, a way of giving yourself, your real self, not the performance of it, to the days and the people and the work that make up the one life you have been given. He ends the book, as I remember it, not with a grand conclusion, but with something much quieter, with a kind of blessing and encouragement to begin, to take one step, however small, toward the life that is actually calling to you. The life that your quietest, most honest self recognizes as true, the life that you can feel in those rare still moments, is the one you were meant to be living. He is not telling you it will be easy. He is not telling you the world will cooperate. He is not telling you that the pressures and the comparisons and the noise will simply disappear. He is telling you something much more practical and much more human than that. He is telling you that it is possible, that people do it, that every day, in quiet ways that never make the news, people choose simplicity over complexity, depth over breadth, presence over production, and that in doing so they find something that all the striving in the world cannot provide. They find their life, the actual one, the real one, the one that was always there, waiting for them to slow down enough to live it. Charles Wagner died in 1918. He lived through the first catastrophic war of the modern era, the war that seemed to prove every anxiety he had ever had about what happens when a civilization loses its moral center, when it optimizes for power and speed and acquisition at the cost of wisdom and compassion and genuine human goodness. He did not live to see how that story continued, but his book survived him, and it is not hard to understand why, because the question he was asking in 1901, the question underneath all of it, is the same question that wakes people up at 3 in the morning in 2026. What am I doing with my life? Is this really what I want? How did it get so complicated? What would it feel like to live simply, honestly, fully in genuine contact with what actually matters? These questions do not have a historical expiration date. They are the permanent questions of being human. And Wagner's answer to them, patient and warm and full of genuine love for ordinary people trying to live well in a world that keeps making it harder, is as useful now as it has ever been. If this summary has landed somewhere in you, if it has touched something you already knew but had forgotten, then the work of the simple life has begun. Not in some dramatic transformation, not in a sudden decision to sell everything and start over, but in a small, quiet shift of attention, a willingness to ask the question, a readiness to hear what your own honest self has to say about how you are living and what you actually want. That is where Wagner's simple life begins. In that willingness, in that honesty, in that courage to listen, however briefly, to the quieter voice underneath the noise. And there is something genuinely hopeful in the fact that you are here, listening to this, giving some of your attention to these ideas. That itself is a kind of beginning, a small act of turning towards something real, something that does not need to be curated or optimized or impressed, something that is simply true. The simple life is not a destination, it is a direction, and every step taken in that direction, however small, however tentative, is a step toward the version of your life that is most fully, most honestly, most genuinely yours. Wagner would say, I think that is enough. That is more than enough. That is, in fact, everything. If this audiobook summary meant something to you, if it gave you something to think about or something to carry with you today, please do take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Audiobook Library. It truly helps the channel grow, it helps more people find content like this, and it makes it possible for us to keep bringing these kinds of books to you in this format. Your support, even just a click, makes a real difference to what we can do here. And before you go, please do take a look at the other videos on our channel. We have a whole library of audiobook summaries covering books on living well, thinking clearly, finding meaning, and navigating the particular difficulties of being human in this particular moment in history. Every video is made with the same care and the same intention as this one, to give you something real, something worth your time, something you can actually use. Thank you for listening. Wagner would be glad you did.